Montana Territory, 1885. The thundering hoofbeats of Quentin Stratton's stallion matched the pounding of his heart as he raced across the endless prairie toward home. At 24, he was the youngest cattle baron in Three Rivers County, having inherited the sprawling Double S Ranch 2 years prior when influenza claimed both his parents within a week of each other. His brown hair, the color of rich soil after rain, danced in the wind as he rode, blue eyes fixed on the horizon where his family's ranch house stood silhouetted against the setting sun. Behind him stretched 15,000 acres of prime Montana grassland, 5,000 head of cattle, and a reputation that made men twice his age both envious and wary. The Double S was the crown jewel of the territory, and Quentin its reluctant king. "Come on, Thunder," he urged his horse, feeling the powerful muscles bunch beneath him as they cleared a small creek in a single bound. "Let's get home before Mrs. Perkins sends out a search party." His housekeeper's tendency toward motherly panic was the least of his concerns, however. The telegram in his pocket weighed heavier than the Colt revolver on his hip. News from the bank in Helena suggested the cattle market was softening, and with 3 ranch hands quitting last month to seek gold in the mountains, Quentin's empire was starting to show cracks in its foundation. As the ranch house grew larger in his vision, he noticed something unusual. Smoke rising from the kitchen chimney hours after the midday meal should have concluded. Mrs. Perkins typically saved her baking for mornings, claiming the afternoon heat made pastry dough ornery as a wet cat. A flash of curiosity replaced his brooding thoughts. Little did Quentin know that the smoke curling from his chimney marked the beginning of a story that would change everything. "I simply cannot work under these conditions, Mr. Stratton." The wooden spoon in Mrs. Perkins' hand trembled with indignation as she waved it toward the kitchen ceiling. "First the roof leaks onto my clean floors. Then the stove decides to smoke us all to kingdom come. And now my hip is acting up something fierce. I've served your family faithfully for 20 years, but I need my sister's care in Bozeman for at least a month, maybe longer." Quentin ran a hand through his hair, still damp from the hasty washing he'd done after discovering his housekeeper's distress. "Mrs. Perkins, I understand completely. Your health comes first. But what am I supposed to do about feeding the men? The spring cattle drive starts in 3 weeks, and Cook's hands are full just managing the bunkhouse meals." The older woman's expression softened as she regarded the young man she'd watched grow from a mischievous boy into the master of Montana's most prosperous ranch. Despite his wealth, there remained something vulnerable in his eyes that tugged at her heart. "That's why I took the liberty of finding a temporary replacement." Mrs. Perkins smiled triumphantly. "The Taylor family lost their farm to that nasty bank foreclosure last month. Their daughter, June, is in desperate need of work. She's young, only 20, but that girl can cook circles around women twice her age." Quentin frowned. "The Taylors from Willow Creek? I heard about that foreclosure. Shame what those eastern banks are doing to small farmers." He hadn't met the family personally, though he recalled seeing them in town occasionally, a hard-working bunch with too many children and too little land. "June will be here tomorrow morning," Mrs. Perkins continued, ignoring his hesitation. "I'll show her the routines before I leave on Friday's stage. She'll stay in the small room off the kitchen, just as I do. You've thought of everything, haven't you?" Quentin couldn't help but smile at his housekeeper's efficiency. Mrs. Perkins patted his cheek. "Someone has to, dear boy. You're too busy worrying about everyone else to worry about yourself." After she bustled away to pack, Quentin stood alone in the large kitchen, suddenly aware of how empty the house felt despite its grandeur. For bedrooms upstairs, a study, formal dining room, and parlor, spaces meant for a family he didn't have. The ranch consumed his days, ledgers and cattle contracts his evenings. At 24, he'd become exactly what his father wanted: successful, respected, and utterly alone. What would a farm girl from Willow Creek make of this place? He wondered, fingering the telegram in his pocket. And what would she make of him? June Taylor arrived at the Double S Ranch precisely at 7 the following morning, her few possessions packed into a single threadbare carpet bag. She'd walked the 5 miles from town, unwilling to spend precious coins on the stagecoach for such a short distance. Her calico dress, faded from countless washings but meticulously clean, fluttered around her ankles as she approached the imposing 2-story ranch house. Taking a deep breath, June smoothed her honey-blonde hair, tucked neatly into a simple bun at the nape of her neck. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "Stand tall, June. We may have lost our land, but we haven't lost our dignity." The Taylor family's fall from modest prosperity to destitution had been swift and merciless. After her father's accident with the threshing machine left him unable to work, the bank had shown no mercy. Now her parents and 5 younger siblings were crowded into her uncle's small home in town, while June sought work to help support them. When Mrs. Perkins had approached her after church with the offer of temporary employment at the Double S, June had nearly wept with relief. The wages were generous, more money than she'd ever earned, though the prospect of working for Quentin Stratton was intimidating. Everyone in the county knew of the young rancher's wealth and influence. As June raised her hand to knock, the door swung open unexpectedly, causing her to stumble backward in surprise. There stood a man she assumed must be Mr. Stratton, though he looked younger than she'd imagined. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that belonged on the cover of those penny romance novels her friend Mariah secretly read. His jaw was angular but not severe, with just a hint of stubble suggesting he'd risen early. It was his eyes that caught her attention most. Deep blue like the mountain lakes her father once took her fishing at, and currently widened in apparent surprise. "Oh," June exclaimed, nearly dropping her bag. "Good morning, Mr. Stratton. I'm June Taylor. Mrs. Perkins is expecting me." "Miss Taylor," he replied, his voice deeper than she'd anticipated. "Yes, she mentioned you'd be arriving." He seemed to be studying her face with unexpected intensity. "I was just heading out to check on a sick calf. Please, go right in. Mrs. Perkins is in the kitchen." June clutched her bag tighter. "Thank you, sir. I'm looking forward to working here." A curious expression crossed his features, something between amusement and skepticism. "We'll see if you still feel that way after a week of feeding ranch hands, Miss Taylor." Before she could respond, he strode past her toward the barn, leaving June to wonder what exactly she'd gotten herself into. Taking another steadying breath, she stepped into the house that would be her home for the coming month, perhaps longer, if she proved her worth. The grandeur of the entryway momentarily stunned her. A polished wooden staircase curved upward to the second floor, while a crystal chandelier hung overhead. June had never seen such luxury outside of magazine illustrations. Following the sound of clattering dishes, she made her way to the kitchen at the back of the house. The space was 3 times larger than her family's entire former kitchen, with a massive cast-iron stove, oak cabinets, and a table that could seat 8 comfortably. "There you are, child." Mrs. Perkins bustled toward her, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. "I was beginning to worry." "I'm so sorry if I'm late," June said, setting down her bag. "I walked from town." Mrs. Perkins's eyes widened. "Walked? 5 miles. Good heavens, you should have said something. Mr. Stratton would have sent a wagon." June shook her head. "The exercise did me good. Now, where shall I put my things, and how can I help you today?" The older woman's expression softened. "Your room is through that door, small but comfortable. As for helping, there's bread rising that needs punching down, chicken to prepare for dinner, and I'll need to show you where everything is kept." She paused, studying June with shrewd eyes. "Mr. Stratton takes breakfast at 6:30, dinner at noon precisely, and supper at 7. The hands eat in the bunkhouse most days, but Sunday supper is served to everyone in the dining room. Can you manage all that?" "Yes, ma'am," June replied confidently, already rolling up her sleeves. "My mother taught me to cook for 9 with whatever we had on hand. I'm not afraid of hard work." Mrs. Perkins nodded approvingly. "Good. You'll need that spirit here. The Double S demands much, but it gives much in return." She hesitated, then added more softly, "Mr. Stratton is a fair employer, though he keeps to himself. His parents' passing hit him hard. The ranch is his whole life now." June absorbed this information silently, wondering about the brief glimpse she'd had of the young rancher. There had been something in his eyes, a loneliness perhaps, that resonated with her own circumstances. "Well," she said brightly, pushing away such thoughts, "let's get started. I have much to learn before Friday." As June tied on a borrowed apron, she had no way of knowing that the skills learned in her humble farm kitchen would soon change not only her fate, but that of the most eligible bachelor in Three Rivers County. Quentin returned from the northern pasture later than expected, having spent hours helping his foreman mend a broken fence line. As he approached the ranch house, The golden light of sunset streamed through the kitchen windows. Quentin took his seat, trying to recall the last time someone had prepared a meal specifically to please him rather than simply fulfill a duty. "You've been busy today," he observed, noting the fresh-baked bread and apple cobbler also waiting on the sideboard. "Learning my way around," June replied, stepping back with hands clasped before her. "Your kitchen is wonderfully equipped, though I've suggested a few improvements to Mrs. Perkins." "Improvements?" Quentin raised an eyebrow, taking his first bite of chicken. The flavor burst in his mouth, tender, perfectly seasoned, unlike anything Mrs. Perkins had ever prepared. He struggled to maintain his composure as he chewed. "The pantry organization could be more efficient, and your herb garden lacks several essentials. I took the liberty of writing a list." June's confidence seemed to waver slightly. "If that's acceptable, sir." "This is—" Quentin paused, searching for a word that wouldn't sound excessive. "Very good, Miss Taylor." A smile transformed her face, revealing a small dimple in her right cheek. "Thank you. It's my mother's recipe, though I added my own touches." For the first time in months, Quentin found himself enjoying a meal rather than simply consuming it out of necessity. As June served him apple cobbler with fresh cream, he noticed calluses on her slender hands, evidence of a life of labor belied by her graceful movements. "Mrs. Perkins mentioned your family lost their farm," he said, immediately regretting his bluntness when a shadow crossed June's features. "Yes," she answered quietly. "The Willow Creek property. My father broke his back in a threshing accident last fall. Without his labor, we couldn't meet the bank's terms." Quentin frowned. "Henderson at First Territorial? I've had dealings with him." June's expression hardened slightly. "Mr. Henderson gave us 3 days to vacate after 15 years of payments. My mother begged for an extension until harvest, but he refused." A complicated emotion twisted in Quentin's chest. He sat on the board of that very bank, though he'd been away during the vote on the Taylor foreclosure. "I'm sorry," he offered inadequately. "We endure," June replied simply. "My family has known both plenty and want, Mr. Stratton." Character reveals itself in how one handles each condition. Something in her dignified response made Quentin look at her more carefully. Beyond her obvious beauty, the kind that required no cosmetics or fancy styling, there was a strength in June Taylor that commanded respect. "And how am I handling my plenty, Miss Taylor?" The question escaped before he could reconsider it. June's eyes widened at his unexpected query. After a moment's hesitation, she answered truthfully. "I wouldn't presume to judge after less than a day's acquaintance, sir. But I will say that a man's kitchen often reflects his heart, and yours." She glanced around the immaculate but impersonal space. "Yours seems efficient but unused, like a room waiting for life to happen in it." Her insight struck uncomfortably close to home. Quentin set down his spoon, the delicious cobbler suddenly less appealing. "Perhaps that's a fair assessment of more than just my kitchen, Miss Taylor." An awkward silence fell between them before June cleared her throat. "Mrs. Perkins asked me to inform you that she's prepared everything for her departure tomorrow. The stage leaves at 10. Grateful for the change in subject, Quentin nodded. "I'll drive her into town myself. Will you be comfortable here alone until I return?" "Perfectly," June assured him. "I plan to inventory the pantry and prepare pies for Sunday's dinner with the hands." As she began clearing the dishes, Quentin found himself lingering at the table rather than retreating to his study as usual. "What sort of pies?" June paused, a small smile playing at her lips. "Apple, of course. My father always said my apple pie could make the angels weep." "A bold claim," Quentin remarked, surprised to find himself smiling in return. "You'll have to judge for yourself, Mr. Stratton." June's eyes held a glint of challenge. "That is, if you join your men for Sunday dinner." Quentin couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten with his ranch hands. Sometime before his father died, certainly. "Perhaps I will," he said, rising from the table. "Good night, Miss Taylor." "Good night, Mr. Stratton." As he climbed the stairs to his bedroom, Quentin realized he'd completely forgotten about the worrisome telegram. For the first time in months, his mind was occupied with something other than cattle prices and ranch operations, specifically, the curious question of what might make angels weep with joy. The first week of June's employment passed in a blur of activity. After Mrs. Perkins's departure, she threw herself into transforming the kitchen, scrubbing neglected corners, reorganizing cupboards, and infusing the space with her own particular brand of practical beauty. Wildflowers in mason jars brightened windowsills, and the perpetual aroma of baking bread made the house feel more like a home than it had in years. Quentin found himself inventing reasons to return to the house during the day. A forgotten ledger, a change of gloves, trivial excuses that allowed brief glimpses of June at work. Her presence had an inexplicable effect on the atmosphere of the entire ranch. Even his foreman, the perpetually dour Mr. Ellis, commented on the improvement in meals. "That new girl of yours can cook, boss," he'd said after sampling June's chicken and dumplings. "The men are wondering if she's got sisters." The question had provoked an unexpected surge of possessiveness in Quentin. "She's here to cook, Ellis, not to provide matrimonial prospects for the hands." Sunday dinner proved revelatory. True to her word, June prepared apple pies that left the entire bunkhouse momentarily speechless. Quentin watched in fascination as his usually rowdy ranch hands transformed into polite, appreciative gentlemen in June's presence. She served each man with the same respectful attention, learning names and preferences with genuine interest. When Quentin finally tasted the legendary apple pie, the experience bordered on transcendent. The crust was flaky perfection, the filling a perfect balance of tart and sweet, with hints of cinnamon, nutmeg, and something else he couldn't identify that elevated it beyond anything he'd tasted before. "My God," he murmured after the first bite, drawing chuckles from the men. June appeared at his elbow, a knowing smile on her lips. "Well, Mr. Stratton, would the angels weep?" "The angels would forsake heaven for another slice," he replied with unusual candor, earning a blush that spread delicately across her cheeks. Later that evening, after the hands had returned to the bunkhouse and June was washing the last of the dishes, Quentin lingered in the kitchen doorway. "Miss Taylor, I wonder if I might ask you something." June looked up from her work, wiping her hands on her apron. "Of course. What's your secret? In the pie, I mean. There's something I can't quite identify." Her expression softened. "My mother taught me to add a few drops of rose water to the filling, and I grate in a little lemon zest. But the real secret is in the apples themselves, how you cut them, how long you let them sit with the sugar before baking. You speak of cooking the way my father spoke of breeding cattle, as both science and art." June smiled fully then, that charming dimple appearing. "That's exactly what it is. The science ensures consistency, but the art makes it memorable." She hesitated before adding, "Your father must have been a remarkable man to build all this." "He was," Quentin agreed, suddenly aware of how rarely he spoke of his parents now. "Determined, far-sighted. He came here with nothing and built the double S through sheer force of will." "And your mother?" "Gentle but strong. She kept the books, managed the household, and still found time to teach me to read and appreciate beauty." Quentin's throat tightened unexpectedly. "She planted every flower bed on this property." June's eyes reflected understanding. "The roses by the front porch are especially lovely. I noticed them my first day. They were her pride." Quentin shifted uncomfortably and used to such personal conversation. "What of your parents? Are they well settled at your uncle's?" A shadow crossed June's face. "As well as can be expected. My father struggles with pain daily, and my mother worries about being a burden. My youngest siblings don't fully understand why we can't go home." She squared her shoulders. "But we're fortunate compared to many. At least we have family willing to take us in." Quentin nodded, thinking of the homeless families he'd seen in Helena, former farmers displaced by drought, economic hardship, or predatory lending practices. The double S's security suddenly seemed less a testament to his business acumen and more a product of fortunate circumstances and inheritance. "Your apple pie," he said abruptly, changing the subject. "Would you consider making one especially for me? For personal consumption." The request sounded frivolous even to his own ears, but the desire for more of that remarkable creation overrode his usual restraint. June's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "Of course, Mr. Stratton. It would be my pleasure." As he bid her good night and climbed the stairs to his lonely bedroom, Quentin wondered when exactly June Taylor had transformed from the temporary help to a person whose approval he found himself inexplicably seeking. The realization was as uncomfortable as it was unavoidable. Something was changing at the double S, and it had nothing to do with cattle or land. June discovered the account books quite by accident. While searching for a particular baking dish in the butler's pantry, she knocked over a wooden box containing what appeared to be household ledgers. As she gathered them up, one fell open to reveal columns of numbers in a feminine hand, dated 2 years earlier. Curiosity overcame propriety, and June found herself examining the careful accounting of the Stratton household expenses. Mrs. Stratton, she realized, had been meticulous in her record-keeping, noting everything from major purchases to the cost of canning supplies. The later entries showed signs of illness, shakier handwriting, abbreviated notes, until they stopped abruptly in October 1883. Following those were entries in a different hand. Mrs. Perkins, June assumed, but the detailed care of the original keeper was missing. Food expenses had increased dramatically while variety decreased. The garden entries disappeared entirely. June closed the book thoughtfully. No wonder the kitchen had felt so unloved. After Mrs. Stratton's death, it had become purely functional, a place for basic needs rather than nourishment of body and soul. That evening, as Quentin enjoyed the special apple pie she'd prepared, his second piece, she noted with satisfaction. June gathered her courage. "Mr. Stratton, I hope you won't think me presumptuous, but I've been reviewing the household accounts." Quentin looked up, surprise evident in his expression. "The accounts? Whatever for?" "To better understand the kitchen needs and budget," June explained. "Your mother kept beautiful records. I noticed the household garden production has declined significantly since her passing." A shadow crossed his features. "Mrs. Perkins never had much interest in gardening, and I've been occupied with the ranch operations." "Of course," June said carefully. "I only mention it because reviving the kitchen garden could significantly reduce your household expenses while improving meal quality. Your mother's notes suggest the soil south of the house is particularly fertile." Quentin set down his fork, studying her with unexpected intensity. "You've given this considerable thought." "I grew up making much from little, Mr. Stratton. It becomes second nature to see potential where others might not look." After a moment's contemplation, he nodded. "What would you need?" June blinked, not having expected such immediate acquiescence. "Seeds, primarily. Some basic tools. Perhaps one of the hands could turn the soil when they have time." "Draw up a list," Quentin said decisively, "and take whatever help you need. If my mother's garden can be restored, I'd like to see it happen." The warmth in his voice when mentioning his mother gave June courage to push further. "There's one other thing, yes? The orchard beyond the south pasture. It's been neglected, but the trees appear sound. With proper pruning, it could produce abundantly again." Quentin's expression shifted to one of surprise. "You've been to the orchard? That's nearly a mile from the house." June felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I walk in the evenings sometimes, after the dishes are done. The sunset view from that hill is quite beautiful." "My mother planted those trees," Quentin said softly. 20 varieties of apples. My father thought it foolishness, but she insisted every proper ranch needed an orchard." "She was right," June offered. "Nothing compares to tree-ripened fruit. The apples I used in your pie came from town, but they're a poor substitute for what those trees could produce." Something shifted in Quentin's expression, a softening around his eyes, a hint of vulnerability quickly masked. "The orchard will need significant work. I'll have Ellis assign someone." "Actually," June said, gathering her courage, "I'd prefer to oversee it myself, if you wouldn't mind. I helped with our family orchard for years." "It's not appropriate work for," Quentin began, then stopped himself. "Forgive me. You're clearly capable, but you already have the house and meals to manage." "I rise early, Mr. Stratton. Dawn is the best time for garden work, before the day's heat. I promise my other duties won't suffer." Quentin considered her for a long moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, Miss Taylor. The orchard is yours to resurrect if you can." As June cleared away his empty plate, she felt an unexpected surge of satisfaction. For the first time since losing the family farm, she would have earth to tend, growing things to nurture. Even if the double S wasn't hers, even if her position here was temporary, the prospect of bringing life back to abandoned soil filled a void she hadn't fully acknowledged. "Thank you, Mr. Stratton," she said simply. "Quentin," he replied unexpectedly. "If you're to be resurrecting my mother's orchard, I think you might call me Quentin, at least when it's just the two of us." June's heart performed an odd little skip. "Then you must call me June." Quentin. His name felt strange and wonderful on her lips, a small intimacy in the growing space between employer and employee. As their eyes met across the kitchen table, June sensed something new taking root, as fragile and promising as the first green shoots of spring. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after June began working at the Double S. Quentin read it twice, his expression darkening, before folding it carefully into his pocket. When he returned to the ranch that evening, the usual warmth of June's welcoming smile couldn't penetrate his mood. "Cattle prices have fallen again," he announced without preamble as she served the roast beef she'd prepared. "The Chicago buyers are offering 10% less than last month." June set down the serving dish. "I'm sorry to hear that. Will it affect the spring drive?" "It changes everything." Quentin pushed his plate away, appetite gone. "We plan to drive 4,000 head to the railroad at Helena. At these prices, we'll barely break even after paying the hands and covering expenses." June sat down across from him, something she'd never done before during a meal. "What options do you have?" Quentin looked surprised at her directness, then oddly grateful. "Hold the cattle and hope prices recover. Sell now and accept the loss. Or find alternative markets." He rubbed his forehead. "My father would know what to do." "What would he do?" June asked softly. "Wait them out, probably. He always said panic selling was a fool's game." Quentin sighed. "But he had reserves I don't have. The improvements to the north section drained much of our liquid capital last year." June considered this, her practical mind turning over the problem. "Could you drive a smaller herd? Just enough to cover immediate expenses." Quentin looked at her with new respect. "That's actually sensible." Ellis suggested something similar. "Send 1,000 head now, hold the rest until fall." "Then you already have your answer," June said with gentle firmness. "It's not that simple. The men expect full wages from a full drive. If I cut back, some will seek work elsewhere." "Or," June suggested, "you could be honest with them. Explain the situation and offer them a percentage of the increased profits if prices rise as expected." Quentin stared at her. "That's exactly what my mother would have said." He shook his head wonderingly. "Where did you learn about ranch economics?" June smiled slightly. "I kept the books for our farm after I finished school. Business is business, whether it's 40 acres or 40,000. For the first time that evening, Quentin's expression lightened. "You continue to surprise me, June Taylor." "Eat your dinner," she replied, rising to return to her duties. "You'll need your strength to outmaneuver Chicago cattle buyers." As June turned away, Quentin caught her hand impulsively. "Thank you." The touch sent an unexpected warmth up her arm. "For what?" "For seeing me as a man with a problem to solve, not just the master of the Double S." His blue eyes held hers, earnest and unguarded. "Few people do that anymore." June gently withdrew her hand, though the warmth of his touch lingered. "Perhaps because you rarely allow them to see anything else." The observation hung between them, more revealing than either had intended. After a moment, Quentin nodded slowly, accepting her insight without defense. "Perhaps you're right." He picked up his fork, appetite apparently restored. "This roast is excellent, by the way." June returned to the stove, her cheeks warm and her thoughts in uncharted territory. The line between employer and employee was blurring in ways both thrilling and terrifying. Spring unfurled across the Montana prairie in a riot of wildflowers and new grass. The apple trees in the old orchard, carefully pruned by June's patient hands, exploded into fragrant blossoms that hummed with honeybees. Her kitchen garden flourished similarly, rows of early vegetables promising abundant harvests. Quentin found himself drawn to these pockets of beauty June had created on his property. Sometimes, in the early morning, he would watch from a distance as she tended her plantings, hair loosened from its usual bun, singing softly to herself as she worked. The sight stirred something long dormant in his chest, a yearning for more than land and cattle, for companionship beyond business relations. The reduced cattle drive departed in early May, with Quentin personally leading the hands. Before leaving, he'd taken June aside. "I'll be gone 2 weeks at least," he'd explained. "Ellis's wife will check on you every few days, but otherwise you'll be alone here." June had nodded calmly. "I'll be perfectly fine. The garden needs constant attention now anyway." Quentin had hesitated, then added awkwardly, "I've left something for you in the study. A small token of appreciation for your contributions." After he'd ridden away with the men, June had investigated the mysterious gift. On Quentin's massive oak desk sat a small wrapped package with her name written in his surprisingly elegant hand. Inside, she found a leather-bound book of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning and a note, "For the evenings when the house is too quiet." The thoughtfulness of the gesture had brought unexpected tears to her eyes. How had he known her love of poetry? Had he noticed the worn copy of Wordsworth she kept beside her bed during his brief visit to her small room when the roof leaked? During his absence, June found herself talking to him in her mind as she worked, imagining sharing discoveries and ideas upon his return. The strange intimacy that had developed between them, part friendship, part something undefined, occupied her thoughts more than was proper. Mrs. Perkins's letter arrived 10 days into Quentin's absence, informing June that her hip was healing well, but her sister had fallen ill, requiring extended care. She requested another month's leave, if Mr. Stratton could manage it. The news left June with complicated feelings. Relief at continued employment warred with awareness that her growing attachment to both Quentin and the double S was dangerous. This was not her home. He was not her future. Her family still needed her support, and eventually, she would need to find permanent employment elsewhere. When Quentin returned, dust-covered and weary from the trail, June had dinner waiting and his bath prepared. The simple domestic welcome seemed to affect him deeply. He'd stopped in the doorway, taking in the fresh-cut flowers on the table, the aroma of roasted chicken and apple pie, and June herself in her best dress, the one she usually saved for Sundays. "Welcome home," she'd said simply. Something in his expression had shifted then, his eyes softening as they moved over her face. "It's good to be home." The emphasis on the last word hadn't escaped her notice. Later that evening, after recounting the successful drive and negotiations that had secured better prices than expected, Quentin had asked June to join him in the study. There, over glasses of his father's good brandy, he'd revealed his developing plans. "I've been thinking about what you said, about finding alternative markets." His eyes had gleamed with new energy. Why sell exclusively to Chicago when Denver is expanding rapidly? And the mining operations in Helena need steady beef contracts. June had listened, offering practical suggestions when asked, marveling at the transformation in the man before her. Where once had been a dutiful son following his father's established patterns, now stood an innovator charting his own course. The double S could become more than just a cattle operation, he continued excitedly. "With your orchard restored, we could sell apples and preserves. Your kitchen garden proves this soil can produce abundantly." The casual "we" hadn't escaped June's notice, though she'd carefully kept her expression neutral. "Diversification is wise," she'd agreed, "but it requires additional labor and expertise, which we can hire," Quentin had replied, leaning forward eagerly. "June, I've seen what you've accomplished in just 1 month. Imagine what could be done with proper resources." The vision he painted was seductive, a thriving, multifaceted ranch with orchards, gardens, and cattle. A place where beauty and practicality coexisted, where June's skills would be valued and expanded. But even as she nodded and contributed ideas, a quiet voice in June's heart whispered caution. Was she seeing herself as a permanent part of this future? And in what capacity? The warmth in Quentin's eyes when he looked at her suggested possibilities that both thrilled and terrified her. Now, 2 days after his return, June stood in the orchard at dawn, these questions still circling in her mind as she checked the developing fruit. The apple blossoms had given way to tiny green nubs that would, with time and care, become the fruit of her labor. Time and care, both luxuries that temporary help couldn't count on. "You're up early." June turned to find Quentin approaching through the dewy grass, more casually dressed than usual in a simple shirt and trousers, his hair slightly tousled from sleep. "The morning is the best time to assess the trees," she explained, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "The light shows any problems clearly." "And what does the light show you today?" He moved beside her, studying the small tree with apparent interest. "Promise," June answered honestly. "These trees are stronger than they appear. With continued care, they'll produce abundantly this fall." "Continued care," Quentin repeated, his gaze shifting from the tree to her face. "June, I received a letter from Mrs. Perkins yesterday." June's heart sank. "She's returning?" "No. Her sister's condition has worsened. She's regretfully offering her resignation, effective immediately." He watched June carefully. which leaves me with a proposition for you. A proposition? June's pulse quickened. A permanent position. As housekeeper, head of kitchen gardens, and orchard manager for the Double S. Quentin's expression was earnest, almost boyish in its hopefulness. The salary would be double what you're currently earning, with a proper contract and additional help hired as needed. June stared at him, conflicting emotions washing over her. The offer was incredibly generous, more than she could have hoped for in her circumstances. Yet something in the formal, businesslike nature of the proposition left her oddly hollow. "That's very kind," she managed finally. "May I have time to consider?" Surprise flickered across his features. "Of course. I assumed. That is, given your family's situation. My family's needs are precisely why I must consider carefully," June replied, more sharply than intended. "A permanent position here would mean establishing my parents and siblings elsewhere long-term. Such decisions shouldn't be made hastily." Quentin nodded slowly, a new wariness in his eyes. "Of course. Take whatever time you need." As he walked away through the orchard, shoulders slightly hunched, June wondered if she'd misunderstood something fundamental about their evolving relationship. Had she imagined the personal warmth between them? Was she merely a valuable employee to him after all? The tiny apples on the branch before her suddenly seemed like a rebuke. They would grow and ripen regardless of who tended them. The orchard would flourish with proper care from any knowledgeable hand. Perhaps that's all she was to Quentin Stratton, the right hands at the right time, nothing more. "You did what?" Marcus Ellis stared incredulously at his employer across the stable yard. Quentin ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I offered her a permanent position. A good one, with excellent pay." The foreman, 20 years Quentin's senior, and one of the few people who spoke to him with complete candor, shook his head slowly. "And you wonder why she didn't jump at the chance. I don't understand women, Ellis." Quentin kicked at a stone, feeling remarkably like the boy who'd once followed the foreman around this same yard, pestering him with questions. "What did I do wrong?" Ellis leaned against the corral fence, his weathered face thoughtful. "Let me ask you something. When you look at Miss Taylor, what do you see?" "An exceptional woman," Quentin answered immediately. "Intelligent, hard-working, skilled, a woman you could hire," Ellis interrupted, "or a woman you could love." The question hit Quentin like a physical blow. He stared at his foreman, mouth slightly open. "Because if it's the latter," Ellis continued matter-of-factly, "offering her a job is about the worst way to go about winning her heart." "I never said anything about, you didn't have to, boss." Ellis's expression softened. "I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. I've seen how you look at her. The whole ranch has." Heat crept up Quentin's neck. "It's not that simple. She needs security, stability. Her family could be cared for just as well if you offered her a different position entirely." Ellis straightened, adjusting his hat. "But that would require courage of a different sort than facing down rustlers or negotiating cattle contracts." With that parting observation, the foreman strode away, leaving Quentin to confront truths he'd been carefully avoiding for weeks. Did he love June Taylor? The question seemed simultaneously absurd and inevitable. He'd known her barely 2 months. Yet in that time, she'd transformed not just his home, but his vision for the future. Her presence had awakened long-dormant parts of himself. The young man who once read poetry under apple trees, who dreamed of more than merely continuing his father's legacy. But what right did he have to offer her anything beyond employment? Her circumstances made any romantic overture from him inherently coercive. The power imbalance between them was stark. He the wealthy rancher, she the displaced farm girl desperate to support her family. And yet, there had been moments. The way her eyes lingered on his face when she thought he wasn't looking. The careful attention to his preferences. The conversations that stretched late into evening, ranging far beyond household matters into dreams, ideas, shared perspectives on everything from literature to land management. Quentin made his way slowly toward the house, his mind in turmoil. Through the kitchen window, he could see June kneading bread dough, her movements graceful and assured. The sight tugged at something deep in his chest, a longing not just for her skills or companionship, but for June herself, in all her complicated, principled beauty. Ellis was right. Quentin had offered June a job because it was safe for him. It kept their relationship defined and controlled, protecting his heart while seemingly addressing her needs. but it had also denied the true nature of his feelings and insulted hers by reducing their connection to an economic transaction. The question now was whether he had the courage to offer something far more vulnerable, and whether June would consider accepting it. June was placing the final apple in the latticework of her pie when a shadow fell across the kitchen workspace. Looking up, she found Quentin watching her from the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You have a visitor," he announced, his voice oddly formal. "Your brother is waiting in the parlor." June's hand stilled. "Michael? Is something wrong?" He didn't say. Quentin stepped aside to let her pass. "Take whatever time you need." Heart pounding, June hastily wiped her hands and removed her apron. Her 17-year-old brother rarely left their uncle's store where he'd found work after the farm was lost. His presence at the Double S could only mean trouble. She found Michael standing awkwardly in the formal parlor, hat in hands, looking both older and younger than his years in clothes that no longer fit properly. "June." Relief washed over his features. "I wasn't sure I'd find you." "What's happened?" she demanded, searching his face. "Is it father? Mother?" Michael shook his head. "They're fine." "Well, as fine as can be expected." He hesitated. "It's about Uncle Robert's house. The roof collapsed in the back bedroom during yesterday's storm. We're all having to sleep in the main room now." June closed her eyes briefly. "I've been sending money home. Isn't it enough for repairs?" "It's not about money, exactly." Michael twisted his hat nervously. "Uncle says the house is too small for all of us, especially with winter coming. He's asked me to find other arrangements." "He's putting you out?" June's voice rose in indignation. "Not cruelly," Michael defended. "He suggested I look for work with room and board included. Maybe as a ranch hand somewhere." June absorbed this, mind racing. "And you came here hoping." "Mr. Stratton is known to be fair," Michael said quickly. "I'm strong, a hard worker. I thought maybe." "I see." June sat down heavily on the nearest chair. If Michael joined the Double S staff, her decision about Quentin's offer would effectively be made. She couldn't leave her brother, especially if he was just getting established. The parlor door opened, and Quentin himself entered, carrying a tray with coffee and cookies that June recognized as ones she'd baked that morning. "I thought you might want refreshments," he said, setting the tray down with a casualness that didn't quite mask his curiosity. "Is everything all right, Miss Taylor?" The formal address stung after weeks of June in private. Something had shifted between them since his job offer, a new carefulness that felt like loss. "My brother has come seeking employment," June explained, gesturing to Michael. "Michael, this is Mr. Stratton." The young men assessed each other, Michael standing straighter under Quentin's scrutiny. "What experience do you have?" Quentin asked directly. "Farm work mostly, sir. But I'm a quick learner." Michael's earnestness was palpable. "I can ride, rope adequately, and I'm good with animals." Quentin nodded thoughtfully. "Ellis mentioned needing help with the younger stock. We could try you there, on a trial basis." He glanced at June. "Room and board in the bunkhouse. Of course, with standard wages for a beginning hand." The efficient resolution should have relieved June. Instead, she felt a strange hollowness. Every development seemed to be binding her more tightly to the Double S. Yet the connection she'd thought was developing with Quentin himself seemed to be fading. "Thank you, Mr. Stratton," Michael was saying enthusiastically. "I won't disappoint you." "See that you don't," Quentin replied, not unkindly. "Your sister has set a high standard for the Taylor family at the Double S." Their eyes met briefly over Michael's head, and June caught a glimpse of something raw and uncertain in Quentin's gaze before he looked away. "I should return to my pie," she said, rising. "Michael, once you're settled, come to the kitchen and I'll feed you properly." As she walked away, June heard Quentin beginning to explain ranch operations to her brother. The easy male camaraderie in their voices emphasized her own uncertain position, neither family nor merely employee, suspended between worlds with no clear path forward. The summer days lengthened, filling with endless work as the Double S thrived under Quentin's evolving management approach. June's gardens produced abundantly, her kitchen became renowned throughout the county, and her apple orchard promised a spectacular first harvest. Michael adapted quickly to ranch life, his natural affinity for animals earning Ellis's grudging approval. Other hands began treating him as a younger brother rather than an outsider, and June's heart warmed to see him developing confidence and skills their father would have been proud of. Yet despite these satisfactions, June found herself increasingly restless. Quentin's offer of permanent employment remained open but undiscussed between them, hanging like an unacknowledged shadow over their interactions. Their once easy conversations had become perfunctory, limited to household matters and ranch business. Quentin himself seemed distracted, making frequent trips to Helena and returning with ledgers and documents he pored over late into the night. June would find him in the study at dawn, often having fallen asleep at his desk, maps and papers scattered around him. On a particularly hot August afternoon, as June was preparing preserves from the bounty of her garden, Quentin appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "I've been meaning to ask your opinion on something," he began, holding a folded document. "If you have a moment." June wiped her hands on her apron. "Of course." He placed the paper on the kitchen table and carefully unfolded it to reveal architectural drawings. "I'm considering additions to the house." Curious, June examined the plans. They showed a significant expansion of the Double S ranch house, additional bedrooms, an enlarged kitchen with modern amenities, a conservatory, and a second study. "This would be a major undertaking," she observed, noting the detailed specifications. "Are you planning to entertain more formally?" "Not exactly." Quentin seemed unusually tense, his fingers drumming lightly on the table's edge. "I've been thinking about the future. The Double S needs to evolve if it's going to thrive in changing times. And evolution requires a larger house." June asked, puzzled. "It requires appropriate infrastructure for the vision I have." Quentin took a deep breath. "A vision that includes orchards, gardens, preserved goods for commercial sale, possibly even a small dairy operation. The kind of diversified ranch that can weather market fluctuations and provide opportunity for more than just cattle hands." June's heart quickened as she recognized her own ideas woven throughout his plan. "You've given this considerable thought." "I have." His blue eyes met hers directly for the first time in weeks. "June, A commotion from the yard interrupted him, voices raised in alarm, the sound of running feet. Quentin moved quickly to the window. "Fire!" he exclaimed. "The north barn." June followed his gaze to see smoke billowing from the direction of the equipment barn where hay and feed were stored. Without another word, Quentin bolted from the kitchen, leaving the house plans forgotten on the table as he raced toward the emergency. For hours, everyone on the ranch fought the blaze. June organized a bucket brigade from the well, working alongside the men as the summer dry would fed the hungry flames. By sunset, the fire was contained, though the barn itself was a total loss. Miraculously, no people or animals had been injured. Exhausted, soot-covered men gathered in the yard as Ellis counted heads and assessed damage. June distributed water and cold cloths for burned hands and smoke-irritated eyes. "Where's Michael?" she asked suddenly, not seeing her brother among the assembled hands. Ellis frowned. "He was checking the far pasture earlier. Should have been back by now." Before June could respond, a rider appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the darkening sky. Even at a distance, she recognized her brother's lanky frame. He was galloping hard, waving one arm urgently. "Something's wrong," Quentin muttered, moving to intercept the approaching rider. Michael reined in his horse sharply, nearly sliding from the saddle in his haste. "Rustlers," he gasped. "North Ridge. 20 men at least, driving about 50 head toward the pass." Ellis swore colorfully. "Had to hit us now, with everyone distracted by the fire." "It was deliberate," Quentin concluded grimly. "The fire was a diversion." He turned to the gathered men. "Who's able to ride?" A dozen hands stepped forward immediately despite their exhaustion. Quentin nodded. "Ellis, organize the men. Armed, with provisions for overnight, if necessary." "I'll get my rifle." "I'm coming too," Michael insisted. Ellis shook his head. "You're too green, boy. Stay here with the others and keep watch in case they circle back." "But I found them," Michael protested. "I know exactly where they're headed." Quentin hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "We need his eyes. But you stay with me, understand? No heroics." June watched in growing horror as preparations were hastily made. Within 20 minutes, the pursuit party was mounted and armed. Quentin, rifle across his saddle, paused beside her. "We'll be back by morning if all goes well," he said quietly. "If not, send word to the sheriff in Helena." June reached up impulsively to touch his arm. "Be careful, both of you." Something flickered in Quentin's eyes, regret, determination, or perhaps something deeper. "There are letters in my desk," he said abruptly. "If anything happens to me, don't," June interrupted. "You'll be back by morning. You said so yourself." He nodded once, then turned to join the waiting men. As the riders thundered away into the gathering darkness, June felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. The half-finished conversation in the kitchen, the abandoned house plans. Suddenly these seemed like loose threads that might never be gathered. For the first time since arriving at the Double S, June found herself praying fervently for something beyond good harvests and fair weather. Dawn broke with no sign of the pursuit party. June, who had barely slept, paced the kitchen while preparing a breakfast that might feed returning men or fuel a search party, depending on what the morning brought. By mid-morning, the remaining hands were visibly anxious. Several volunteered to ride out searching, but without knowing which direction the confrontation might have taken, any search would be guesswork at best. When hoofbeats finally sounded in the yard shortly after noon, June rushed to the door. 4 riders approached, Ellis among them, his expression grim. Behind him rode 2 hands supporting a third man who was slumped in the saddle. "Michael." June ran forward as they carefully lowered her brother to the ground. His face was ashen, blood soaking through a makeshift bandage on his left shoulder. "Bullet caught him when the shooting started," Ellis explained tersely as they carried Michael into the house. "Clean through, but he's lost blood." "Where's Quentin?" June demanded, already gathering medical supplies. A shadow crossed Ellis's weathered face. "Taken. The rustlers split up when we caught them. Boss went after the smaller group with 3 men. They never rejoined us." June's hand stilled. "Taken? You mean captured or killed?" Ellis confirmed grimly. "Becker found their horses wandering loose, but no bodies. Figure they're holding him somewhere." "For what purpose?" June's voice sounded strange even to her own ears. "Ransom, most likely. Everyone knows the Double S is prosperous." Ellis removed his hat, revealing worry lines etched deeply into his forehead. "I've sent riders to alert the sheriff and check neighboring ranches. If they're demanding payment, word will come." June moved mechanically, cleaning and bandaging Michael's wound while her mind raced. Her brother was young and strong. With proper care, he would recover. "But Quentin, when will the sheriff arrive?" she asked. "Tomorrow at earliest. He's in the field already on another matter." Ellis hesitated. "Miss Taylor, you should know. These aren't ordinary rustlers. They're the Blackwater gang. They've hit 3 other big spreads this summer." June's blood ran cold. Even she had heard of the Blackwater gang, violent outlaws known for their brutality. "If they had Quentin, what can be done?" she asked quietly. Ellis shook his head helplessly. "Wait for the sheriff. Or for ransom demands." After settling Michael in a guest bedroom and assigning a hand to watch him, June retreated to Quentin's study. The house plans still lay where they'd been abandoned, a poignant reminder of interrupted possibilities. Almost without conscious thought, she opened his desk drawer. The letters he'd mentioned were there, one addressed to his banker, another to Ellis, and a third, surprisingly, to June herself. Her hands trembled as she held the sealed envelope. To open it felt like accepting that Quentin might not return. To leave it seemed like abandoning him to fate. Finally, drawing a deep breath, June broke the seal. "June, if you are reading this, circumstances have prevented me from speaking what should have been said long ago. The enclosed document transfers ownership of the orchard and South Gardens to you personally, regardless of your continued employment at the Double S. What you have created there is yours by right of vision and labor. I regret many things, but none more than my cowardice in offering you a position when I should have offered my heart. The truth, which you perhaps already know, is that I have loved you since the first taste of apple pie revealed a woman of extraordinary gifts and character. If Providence grants me the chance to return to you, I will speak these words properly. If not, please know that you brought light back to my house and life when both had grown cold. With deepest affection and respect." Quentin tears blurred June's vision as she read and reread the letter. The enclosed deed was indeed legal and binding, signed and witnessed weeks earlier. He had planned this contingency carefully, ensuring her security while keeping his feelings unspoken. But why? What had prevented him from declaring himself directly? The answer came with sudden clarity. Her circumstances, her family's needs, and dependent position had made him hesitate. He hadn't wanted her to feel pressured or obligated. He'd been protecting her freedom to choose, even at the cost of his own happiness. June carefully refolded the letter, a new determination replacing her fear. If Quentin had been captured rather than killed, there was still hope. And if the Blackwater gang wanted money, they would keep him alive to collect it. Rising from the desk, she went in search of Ellis. She found him in the bunkhouse, organizing the remaining hands into watch rotations. "I need to speak with you privately," she announced. Once alone, June was direct. "I found Quentin's letter. I know about the Blackwater gang. What aren't you telling me?" Ellis's expression confirmed her suspicion that information was being withheld. "It's not for a lady's ears, Miss Taylor." "I'm not just any lady," June countered fiercely. "I'm the woman Quentin Stratton loves, and I refuse to wait helplessly while he's in danger." Surprise registered briefly in Ellis's eyes before he nodded slowly. "The Blackwater gang has a pattern. They take hostages to remote locations. If ransom is paid within 3 days, the hostage is released. If not," he paused. "They're not known for mercy. So we have 3 days at most," June concluded. "Where would they take him? That's the problem. These hills are full of abandoned mining camps and hidden valleys. Without more information, searching is hopeless." June considered this, mind working furiously. "Do we know who they are? Their backgrounds?" "Their leader is Jack Blackwater, former cavalry, dishonorable discharge. Most of his men are drifters, hired guns." Ellis frowned. "Why?" "Because people have patterns," June explained. "Habits, preferences. If we know where they've taken hostages before, the sheriff would have that information, but he won't be here until tomorrow." Ellis looked at her with new respect. "You think like Quentin." "I think like someone who refuses to wait for men to solve problems," June corrected. "Is there anyone else who might know about the gang's previous activities? Former victims, perhaps?" Ellis's eyes widened slightly. "Raymond Tucker over at Pine Creek Ranch. His foreman was taken last winter. They paid the ransom, got him back alive." "Then that's where I'm going," June announced, already calculating the time. Pine Creek Ranch was a half-day's ride to the east. "Absolutely not," Ellis protested. "It's too dangerous for a woman alone." "Then assign someone to accompany me," June countered. "But I'm going with or without escort. Every hour matters now." Something in her determination must have convinced him. Ellis sighed heavily. "I'll send Becker with you." "But Miss Taylor, the boss wouldn't want you putting yourself at risk." June met his gaze steadily. "If our situations were reversed, you know he would do the same." By sunset, June and Becker had reached Pine Creek Ranch. Raymond Tucker, a weathered man in his 50s, received them with grave courtesy when their purpose was explained. "Blackwater," he spat the name. "Scum of the earth. They took my foreman to an old trapper's cabin up Elk Ridge. Primitive but defensible, only one approach route." "And you paid the ransom?" June asked. Tucker nodded grimly. $5,000. Every cent we had. They left him blindfolded at the crossroads. "Do you think they'd use the same location again?" June leaned forward intently. "Doubtful. They're cruel, but not stupid." Tucker studied her curiously. "You're the woman from Stratton's place?" "The cook." "Yes," June answered simply. Tucker's shrewd eyes assessed her determined expression. "You're more than that to him, I'm guessing." June didn't deny it. "Mr. Tucker, if you were Jack Blackwater, where would you take a hostage in this territory?" The older rancher considered the question seriously. "There's an abandoned mining settlement in the high country called Silverdale. Isolated, easily defended. Water source, basic shelter. It's where I'd go if I were planning to wait for ransom." "How far?" Becker asked, speaking for the first time. 15 miles northwest of here. Difficult terrain." Tucker's expression darkened. "But Miss Taylor, even if you find them, what then? Blackwater has at least 20 men. Armed, ruthless men." "I don't know yet," June admitted. "But doing nothing isn't an option." Tucker regarded her for a long moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "My men will join your search at first light. Whatever Stratton did to earn such loyalty, it speaks well of him." June's throat tightened. "Thank you. We'll need every advantage." That night, unable to sleep in the guest room provided by Mrs. Tucker, June found herself on the porch, staring at the star-filled sky. The vastness of Montana had never felt more oppressive. Somewhere in that darkness, Quentin was being held by violent men. Was he injured? Afraid? Did he believe help was coming? "You should rest." Becker's quiet voice came from the shadows. The young hand had appointed himself her guardian, maintaining a respectful but vigilant presence. I keep thinking about what they might be doing to him, June admitted, her voice barely audible. Becker joined her at the railing. The boss is tough. Smart, too. If anyone can survive until rescue, it's him. You've worked for him long? Since I was 16. He gave me a chance when others wouldn't. Becker cleared his throat awkwardly. He's different since you came, Miss Taylor. Happier. The men have noticed. June's eyes burned with unshed tears. I've been happy too. Then we'll find him, Becker said with simple certainty. Get some sleep, Miss Taylor. Tomorrow will be hard riding. June nodded, though she doubted sleep would come. As she turned to go inside, a flicker of movement in the distant darkness caught her attention. A rider, approaching fast. Becker, she called sharply. The hand was instantly alert, hand moving to his holster as the rider drew closer. In the moonlight, they could make out a familiar figure. It's Ellis, Becker exclaimed. The foreman reined in sharply, dust billowing around his horse. Found him, he announced without preamble. Or rather, found where they're holding him. Hope surged in June's chest. Where? Old Petersfield Mine, about 20 miles northwest. One of our hands spotted smoke from their campfire. Ellis dismounted wearily. But it's bad news, Miss Taylor. They've sent their ransom demand, $50,000 by noonday after tomorrow, or they kill him. June's blood ran cold. 50,000? That's impossible. The ranch doesn't have that kind of cash. Exactly, Ellis confirmed grimly. They know it too. This isn't about money. Word is Jack Blackwater has a personal grudge against big ranchers. He wants to make an example of Stratton. How many men guarding him? Tucker asked, having emerged from the house. At least 15 from what we could see, Ellis replied. They've got him in the main mine office. Sturdy building, only one door, windows boarded up. June's mind raced, fragments of possibility beginning to form. Mr. Tucker, do you have a map of that area? The older rancher nodded. In my study. But Miss Taylor, even with my men, we're outnumbered. The sheriff won't arrive in time, and a frontal assault would get Stratton killed for certain. I'm not proposing a frontal assault, June replied, a plan taking shape as she spoke. I'm proposing a deception, but I'll need help, and ingredients I'm not sure you'll have. Tucker's eyebrows rose. Ingredients? What exactly are you planning to cook up, young lady? For the first time since Quentin's capture, June felt a glimmer of hope. Something the Blackwater gang won't be expecting. The old Petersfield mine perched like a wound in the mountainside, its weathered buildings casting long shadows in the early morning light. From their vantage point among the rocks 100 yards away, June could make out armed men patrolling the perimeter. Beside her, Ellis, Tucker, and 8 experienced hands waited silently for her signal. This is madness, Ellis muttered for the 3rd time. The boss would have my hide. If it works, you can blame me entirely, June whispered back, her eyes fixed on the mine office where Quentin was presumably being held. If it fails, well, blame won't matter much to any of us. The night had been spent in frantic preparation. Mrs. Tucker, initially skeptical of June's plan, had eventually become its most enthusiastic supporter, providing the necessary supplies from her pantry and medicinal cabinet. By dawn, everything was ready, and the unlikely rescue party had set out for the abandoned mine. They'll be expecting trouble, Tucker observed quietly. But not this kind of trouble. That's what I'm counting on, June replied, adjusting the basket on her arm. Inside were 2 of her apple pies, still warm from Mrs. Tucker's oven and smelling divine. They appeared ordinary, which was precisely the point. Remember, she instructed the men one final time. No one moves until the signal. No matter what you see or hear. With a deep breath, June stood and began walking openly toward the mine entrance, forcing herself to move with the calm confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. The basket swung naturally from her arm, her blue dress, borrowed from Mrs. Tucker and more refined than anything she usually wore, fluttered in the morning breeze. It took only moments for the guards to spot her. 2 men stepped into view, rifles raised. That's far enough, one shouted. Who are you? June stopped, keeping her expression pleasant but concerned. Oh, I wasn't expecting company up here. I'm June Taylor, from down in the valley. I bring pies to the miners every month, though I thought the place was abandoned now. The men exchanged confused glances. One approached cautiously, rifle still trained on her. There ain't no miners here, lady. No miners. June feigned surprise. But I saw smoke from your fires. Someone must be here. The second man spoke up. This is private property now. You need to leave. June tilted her head, the picture of innocent confusion. But I've walked all this way with fresh pies. They'll go to waste. Surely you gentlemen might enjoy them? Apple, still warm from the oven. She lifted the cloth covering the basket slightly, allowing the aroma to waft toward them. The first guard's expression visibly softened. We can't just, the second guard began. Jack won't know. The first man interrupted. And when's the last time you had homemade pie? June maintained her guileless expression while her heart pounded. The entire plan depended on these first moments. After a brief, whispered argument, the first guard beckoned her forward. Come on then, but be quick about it. June smiled gratefully. You're very kind. There's nothing like apple pie to brighten a day, my mother always says. As she was escorted toward the main cluster of buildings, June counted men, 14 visible, possibly more inside. They watched her with expressions ranging from suspicion to amusement to hunger as she passed, the basket's aroma drawing attention exactly as she'd hoped. The guard brought her to a fire pit where several men were gathered. A tall, bearded man who could only be Jack Blackwater stood as she approached, his cold eyes assessing her with dangerous intelligence. What's this? He demanded. Valley girl with pies, boss, her escort explained. Says she brings him up regular. Didn't know the mine was closed. Blackwater's eyes narrowed. Pretty coincidence, a woman wandering up here just now. June forced her expression to remain innocently confused. Is something wrong, sir? I can leave if I'm intruding. Though it seems a shame to waste good pie. She opened the basket fully, revealing the two perfectly golden crusts. I use a special recipe, won first prize at the county fair 3 years running. A murmur of interest ran through the gathered men. Blackwater's hard expression didn't soften, but he didn't send her away either. Cut the pies, he ordered one of his men. Everyone gets a piece. Thank you kindly, June said, setting the basket down. I'll just fetch plates from my pack. She reached into the small rucksack on her back, withdrawing tin plates and forks. As she distributed them to the increasingly eager men, she continued her innocent chatter. My mother taught me this recipe. The secret is in the spices, cinnamon, of course, but also a touch of nutmeg, and something special I add myself. The pies were cut and distributed, with Blackwater himself taking a piece last. June watched anxiously as the men began eating, exclaiming over the flavor. This is damn good, one declared through a mouthful of pie. Told you, another replied. Valley girls know their baking. Blackwater took a bite, his suspicious expression finally relaxing slightly. Not bad, he admitted. June beamed. I'm so pleased you enjoy it. The special ingredient makes all the difference. What special ingredient? Blackwater asked, taking another bite. Oh, just a particular herb that grows near my home. It adds a unique flavor and has the most remarkable calming effect. Wonderful for soothing nerves after a long day. As she spoke, June watched carefully. Already, several of the men were showing signs, heavier eyelids, slightly slurred speech as they praised the pie. The crushed valerian root and laudanum Mrs. Tucker had provided. For female complaints, the older woman had explained with a conspiratorial wink, were working exactly as hoped. Calming effect? Blackwater repeated, a new suspicion dawning in his eyes. He started to rise, then swayed slightly. What did you? Just a little something to help everyone rest, June said, dropping the innocent act as several men slumped forward. Others were fighting the effect, but their movements had become uncoordinated. You've been working so hard, after all. Blackwater lunged for her, but his drugged reflexes were too slow. June dodged aside as the outlaw leader crashed to his knees. You bitch. He slurred, struggling to draw his pistol. Actually, I'm a baker, June corrected, backing away as she watched the remaining conscious men battling the sedative's effects. And I believe that's my signal. From the rocks surrounding the camp came the sound of multiple rifles being cocked. Ellis, Tucker, and their men emerged from cover, weapons trained on the few outlaws still conscious enough to raise their hands and surrender. Nicely done, Miss Taylor, Tucker called, genuine admiration in his voice as his men began securing the drowsy outlaws. I've never seen anything quite like it. Where is he? June demanded, ignoring the praise as she scanned the buildings. Where's Quentin? Ellis nodded toward the mine office. In there, most likely. Be careful. There could be guards inside who didn't get your special recipe. June was already moving, heart pounding. The office door was locked, but Tucker quickly found keys on Blackwater's unconscious form. With Ellis and Becker flanking her, weapons ready, the door swung open. The interior was dim, smelling of dust and old tobacco. At first, June saw nothing in the gloom. Then, as her eyes adjusted, she made out a figure tied to a chair in the center of the room. Quentin. He was bruised, a cut above his eye crusted with dried blood, but gloriously, undeniably alive. His head jerked up at the sound of the door, eyes widening in disbelief as he recognized her. June. His voice was hoarse, incredulous. What? How? She was across the room in an instant, hands frantically working at the ropes binding him. Don't talk. We need to get you out of here. Ellis and Becker moved to help, cutting through the ropes with quick efficiency. As soon as he was free, Quentin tried to stand, only to stagger weakly. Easy, boss, Ellis cautioned, supporting him. You've had a rough couple of days. Quentin's eyes never left June's face. You came for me, he said wonderingly. How did you? Apple pie, Becker supplied with a grin. Miss Taylor drugged the whole gang. A ghost of a smile touched Quentin's battered face. Of course she did. Outside, Tucker's men had finished securing the outlaws, most of whom were now unconscious or so drowsy they posed no threat. The few who had not eaten the pie were outnumbered and quickly surrendered when they saw their leader bound and helpless. We'll take them to Helena, Tucker announced as Quentin, supported by Ellis and June, emerged into the sunlight. The sheriff can meet us on the road. Quentin nodded gratefully. The Double S owes you a debt, Tucker. The older rancher shook his head. No debt, but you might want to keep this young lady close. He winked at June. Never seen a more determined woman in my life. As the prisoners were loaded onto horses and wagons, Quentin turned to June, his expression intense despite his exhaustion. You risked your life, he said softly, so only she could hear. Why? June met his gaze steadily. I found your letter. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by vulnerability. I meant every word. I know. June reached up to gently touch his bruised cheek. That's why I came. Something shifted between them, a final barrier dissolving. Despite their audience, despite his injuries, Quentin leaned down and kissed her gently. Against his lips, June whispered, I love you too, you stubborn man. When they parted, his smile was brighter than his injuries should have allowed. Does this mean you'll accept a permanent position at the Double S after all? June laughed, the sound clear and joyful in the mountain air. That depends entirely on the position being offered, Mr. Stratton. 3 months later, the Double S Ranch hosted the largest gathering in its history. Lanterns illuminated the yard, tables groaned under the weight of food, and music drifted from the barn where local musicians played for dancers of all ages. At the center of the celebration stood Quentin and June Stratton, married that morning in the small church in Three Rivers. June's family, her recovered father, beaming mother, and siblings of various ages, mingled with ranch hands and neighboring families, all united in celebration of a union that seemed, to everyone who knew the couple, absolutely inevitable. The Stratton house, newly expanded according to the plans June had discovered months earlier, glowed with warmth and welcome. The conservatory Quentin had envisioned was under construction, soon to house exotic plants and June's herb collection through the harsh Montana winters. The kitchen had been rebuilt to her specifications, with modern conveniences that made the ranch hands joke their boss had gone soft for love. They weren't entirely wrong. As twilight deepened and stars appeared above the celebration, Quentin led his bride away from the festivities toward the orchard that had flourished under her care. The trees stood leafless now in late November, but their branches were strong and well-shaped, promising abundant fruit in seasons to come. Happy? Quentin asked, his arm around June's waist as they walked. Completely. She leaned into him, her wedding dress rustling softly against the fallen leaves. Though I still can't believe your wedding gift. A commercial kitchen for preserves and baked goods? You're encouraging my takeover of the Double S operations. Quentin laughed, the sound free and unguarded in a way it never had been before June. Not a takeover, a partnership. The apple butter you made from our first harvest sold out in Helena within a day. There's a market for quality that goes beyond cattle. Just as there's room in a ranch for more than one vision. June agreed, stopping to face him in the orchard that had once been abandoned, now rejuvenated through her care. Quentin took both her hands in his expression growing serious. I've been thinking about the name. The double S? June tilted her head questioningly. It was my father's creation, his brand, his legacy. Quentin's eyes held hers in the starlight. But what we're building together is something new. Something that honors the past while creating its own future. What did you have in mind? June asked softly. Stratton Orchards and Cattle Company, Quentin suggested. Equal prominence, equal importance. A place where apple pies matter as much as beef prices. June's heart swelled with love for this man who had transformed from the remote, dutiful rancher she'd first met into the visionary partner before her. I think it's perfect. Their kiss, sweet and promising, was interrupted by Michael's voice calling from the direction of the party. June. Quentin. They're cutting the wedding cake. June laughed against Quentin's lips. We should go back. It's our celebration, after all. One moment more. Quentin murmured, holding her close. I want to remember this exactly. You, here, in our orchard, on the first day of our life together. The first of many, June promised, her heart full as they turned back toward the lights and music, hand in hand beneath the limitless Montana sky. Behind them, the orchard stood patient and promising in the darkness, its bare branches reaching toward heaven, a testament to what love and care could resurrect, and what determination and vision could build from the most humble beginnings. And in the ranch house kitchen, waiting for the bride and groom's return, sat a wedding cake crowned with the creation that had started everything. June's perfect apple pie, its golden crust and sweet filling a promise of the life they would create together, season after season, harvest after harvest, at the heart of the home they now shared.